Should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I'm having an error here.
What does EAC stand for? Is it Environmental Action Committee or is it something?
Environmental
Environmental
Advisory.
Advisory Committee.
Okay, that was
So we
close.
don't we don't have any real authority in the township. We advise the commissioners.
Can you all see my slides? I hope. All right, great. So thank you for attending this workshop tonight. We're going to talk about ways to manage stormwater on your property, things you can do at home to reduce impervious surface and capture and retain stormwater on your property. And why should we do this? Why is it important? This is from Memorial Day last weekend. These are my kids playing in Cobbs Creek. We had a great time, looking at the little ducks and catching minnows and stuff. And so, this is really why it's important. It got me thinking about, the water quality of the streams in our region. And so earlier today, I was taking a look at Pennsylvania DEP's. This is their 2024 integrated report. It's a report on the water quality of all the streams and lakes in the state. And I zoomed in here on Haverford Township. And, not to get into too much detail about this process, but DEP periodically goes out and assesses the water quality of all the streams and lakes in the state. And they make a determination as to whether, that water is attaining the stream's designated use. So a stream might have different designated uses such as recreation or a cold water fishery, a trout fishery, a warm water fishery. These are all uses that are specified in the state regulations. And as I said, periodically DEP goes out and they look at the water quality, they look at the biota of these streams, and they determine whether or not that stream can be used for what it is designated to be used for. And you can see here that the ones in yellow have been designated as impaired. So every stream in our township is currently impaired for one reason or another. And if you go to this website, it's publicly available. You can click on individual segments and you can click through the determinations here. This is just an example, Cobbs Creek. As you can see, the designated use is aquatic life, warm water fishes, and it is currently impaired for that use. And the reason is is siltation. There's too much silt in the stream, and the source of that impairment is urban runoff and storm sewers. And you can click around and you'll see that is the primary cause of all the impairments is either urban runoff or municipal storm sewers. So yeah, that's why this matters. That's why stormwater management is important. And so how does stormwater pollution happen? I realize this is probably kind of review, a lot of background for people. But basically, as the environment gets developed, right, we build houses, we build shopping malls, we build highways. We're changing, formerly pervious surfaces like grass and forest and trees into impervious surfaces like asphalt and concrete. And that means that when it rains, that water very quickly runs off into the stream, where in an undeveloped environment, it would, infiltrate into the soil, it would get taken up by plants and vegetation, and it would get cleaned before it eventually reaches the stream. Now we have this kind of situation that we call the first flush, right? Where that first rush of water rushing all over that impervious surface is it's concentrating the flow, right? There's a lot of flow in a short period of time that leads to flooding and erosion. And it's also picking up a lot of pollutants off of the impervious surfaces, things like sediment, debris, and trash and litter. I mentioned that there's flow changes, right? You have sort of a concentration of flow that can lead to erosion. There can also be thermal impacts to the streams, right? The rainwater is going to really quickly change the temperature of the stream, and that stresses the fish and the bugs that live in there. The stormwater can also pick up petroleum and metals, like brake dust that accumulates on roadways and transport those pollutants into the stream. Fertilizers and nutrient pollution is also a big problem. When those nutrients end up in the waterway, they tend to essentially consume the oxygen that's present in the water, and degrade the waterway, and also things like detergents. So yeah, as development proceeds, we're replacing pervious surfaces with impervious surfaces. That increases the runoff, which then leads to pollution in the waterway. So how is stormwater regulated? There's a lot of different ways that we regulate stormwater. So for example, industrial facilities are required to have permits for their stormwater discharges. They have to install things that are called stormwater best management practices, and they have to regularly sample the stormwater that's coming off their site and to make sure that it is, not polluted and clean enough to go into a stream. Permits are also required for municipal separate storm sewer systems, or MS4s. We also regulate stormwater through development standards, right? So if you want to build something, a house or an apartment complex, there are standards that say, you have to have this much setback from the property line. You have to have this much pervious surface on your lot. So you can't, overdevelop and just pave an entire lot. There are also permits required for earth disturbance activities. So think like grading, or large construction projects. There are things you have to do to keep the sediment, primarily the sediment, from running off the site during construction. And then finally, there's post-construction stormwater management planning. So, what have you engineered in your structure to handle and convey the stormwater to the sewer system in a way that's not going to result in, flooding or increased runoff or stormwater pollution. So that's a few examples. At the end of last year, the township updated their stormwater ordinance. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of things that, the township has done to try to address the issue of stormwater pollution. So one of the changes in the ordinance is they have lowered the threshold for regulated impervious areas from 1,000 square feet to 500 square feet. So what that means is if you are proposing a new deck or a new driveway or a new addition on your home, if it's over 500 square feet, then that is now going to trigger the stormwater management planning and review process with the township engineer. And we're going to have another workshop next week on Tuesday where we are going to talk in more detail about that process. It sounds complicated, but there are some easier ways to go through that process that we'll talk about. Another change in the ordinance is that threshold that triggers, plan review is now cumulative, going back to February of 2005. So it used to be the case it was kind of this weird loophole situation where you could add, 900 square feet each year, but as long as you didn't trigger that 1,000 square foot threshold, you would never trigger any kind of stormwater management planning or review. So you could kind of keep incrementally adding impervious area to your property. And that's been addressed in the ordinance update. The ordinance also now encourages the use of low impact development and green stormwater infrastructure. Those are fancy terms for essentially just leaving more vegetated areas, using kind of the natural environment to your advantage, and coming up with more greener, low impact ways of retaining and treating stormwater instead of relying on just concrete culverts and piping and things like that. It also now prohibits the discharge of any pool water into the storm sewers. That's just a change to align with existing state laws. So that's good. We're very happy the township chose to do that. So now we'll get into things that you can do at home to help the issue, right? So the first strategy that you want to think about is reducing the impervious surface at your property. And this will also help you, me and my wife, we're planning on putting a sunroom on our house. And so, it's an older home where there's not a lot of impervious area left on our property to develop. So, some of these strategies I'm looking at to try to get some of that impervious surface back, right? So potentially we could have a slightly larger sunroom in the future, hopefully. So one thing that is out there now that you can use are permeable pavers, right? So this is a pavement system that is engineered to allow rainwater to infiltrate through the cracks. You can see there's little gaps between the pavers, and the sub base there, the pea gravel and the crushed stone, is designed to allow that water to infiltrate into the soil. Otherwise, it would just run straight off the driveway out into the street and into the storm sewer system. There's a lot of different designs that are available. The upfront installation costs can be a little high, but they do last a good bit of time. So, if you're looking at your driveway and you think maybe it's coming up on replacement, or it might need to be replaced soon, or sidewalks or patios at your house, this is something that you should consider, because it would significantly reduce the runoff coming off of your home. And if you want to make sure that the pavement system that you're looking at is not going to count as impervious area when the township looks at your plan, you should work with the township engineer, to make sure you're ordering the right stuff and it's being designed and installed in a way that is going to give you credit for that, right? It's that this should all be treated as pervious area, not impervious area. There's also permeable pavement out there, porous concrete and porous asphalt. This is a little bit cheaper than the paver systems that we just looked at. But it requires some more maintenance. They're a little bit more susceptible to the freeze thaw cycles, and you generally don't want to put, road salt on these because it can tend to clog up the pore spacing. So I've seen, mixed success with this stuff. If you take care of it and you keep it clean, then it works great, and it will continue to work great long into the future. But if you have a lot of like leaf clutter and debris and stuff that falls on your driveway or on your pavement, maybe not the best choice. Although it is cheaper to install than the permeable pavers, generally. Downspout disconnection. So this is something that is actually a requirement in the stormwater ordinance now, but we know, a lot of homes they have their downspouts directly connected to the sewer system. When I bought my home a couple years ago, all the downspouts were connected. So that was one of the first things I did was disconnect those, and just, you just send them, get one of those flexible plastic tubes at Home Depot or whatever, and just send the water into the grass or a place where it can just soak into the ground. They're not allowed to be connected to the standpipes, and they're not allowed to discharge directly to the street either. So they should be disconnected. Although if you have a smaller lot, or this isn't really feasible for whatever reason on your property, the township will allow exceptions on a case-by-case basis. This is going back to the downspouts, this is a really simple and easy way to significantly reduce the runoff from your property, because the roof is a pretty significant portion of the impervious area on your lot. And this is really cheap to do. Depaving, right? So maybe at my house, we have an asphalt driveway, and we have these sort of concrete sidewalks and walkways that go around in our backyard. I'm not really sure why they're there or who put them there, but it's something that I'm looking at getting rid of. Again, I'm trying to reduce the impervious area on my lot, not only for stormwater pollution reasons, but also because it may allow us to have a sunroom in the future. So I've seen these ribbon driveways in my neighborhood. I think they look really nice, and you could do that in conjunction with a permeable paver system. But you know, that little strip in the center there, that's a couple hundred square feet that you can reclaim. Again, sidewalks, you know, do you really need them? Are they too wide? Same thing with patios. You know, think about another example at my house is we have a deck, but underneath the deck is concrete pavement, right? So I'm not sure why that concrete is there, but that means whatever water, you know, falls through the deck just goes onto the concrete and runs into my driveway. So these are just things that I've noticed that you know, I'm looking at ripping up and getting rid of. And all that square footage can add up, you know, pretty quickly. The other sort of method that we have, in addition to just reducing impervious areas, is capturing or at least slowing down that stormwater, right? Because we talked about that first flush, that really quick, rapid flow of water. That's where, you know, 90% or more of the stormwater pollution comes from, is in that first 30 minutes or first 30 hour or first hour of the rainstorm. So if you can contain some of that water and do something with it, or at least slow it down, that can have a big impact as well. So here's some methods that, you know, you could do at home. You could get rain barrels, right? These are connected to your downspouts, and it's very simple, very cheap to install. And now you have a barrel of water there that you can use for, you know, watering your garden or cleaning your patio or whatever you want. They do require a little bit of maintenance. You know, you want to keep leaves and other stuff from accumulating in there. You want to keep them empty, obviously, because if they're full, they're not going to hold any additional stormwater when the next rainstorm comes. But if you're interested in this, we're having a rain barrel workshop on June 17th at 6 p.m. at the Crack. And the first 25 people that sign up for that will get a subsidized rain barrel for their home. And we're going to teach you all about how to install and maintain them at that workshop. Downspout planter. So this is similar to a rain barrel, except it's got, you know, underflow and overflow drain in it and a little bit of soil and drainage layer at the bottom. And you can, you know, just grow your flowers or whatever you want in there. It's just a nice little piece. You generally want to use native, you know, perennial and drought tolerant plants. That would be the easiest to maintain. They can just kind of live in there with the periodic stormwater. It don't require a lot of work. But the benefit here is that, you know, whatever rainwater is captured in there is sort of treated and filtered by the soil and the plant system. And some of it is, you know, taken up by the plant and then evaporated and transpired back into the atmosphere, instead of, you know, running down your driveway into the sewer. You know, just planting more trees and planting other vegetation helps a lot too, right? Because these plants, you know, as their root systems develop, they help to promote sort of a deeper, more rapid infiltration of water into the ground. They also retain a lot of water. Obviously, plants, you know, need a lot of water to live, and so they take the water up from the ground and put it back into the air. And all of those things, you know, reduce the amount of runoff that's coming off your property. And mulch and compost are also good ways to help retain some of that moisture on the ground, where it can be used by plants and where it's not just wasted and sent down the drain. Rain gardens. So we have our resident rain garden expert, Peter Puglionisi, with us here. And there is a program in the township called Have a Rain Garden. So Peter, I'm going to play your cool time-lapse video here, and maybe you can talk a little bit about Have a Rain Garden and how folks can get signed up.
Sure. So Have a Rain Garden was created probably 11 years ago. This is the 11th year that we've been building rain gardens. And and we built 10 rain gardens a year for 10 years. We're on year 11 now. And we are, I guess, 2 rain gardens down, 3 to go for the spring, and we'll do another 5 in the fall. And if you are interested in a rain garden, we do assessments, and we, because we do it at either no or low cost to the homeowner, depending on the option that they choose for, how much work that they have to do. We can only do so many. So probably about a third of the homes that we assess wind up getting one of our rain gardens, based on all kinds of factors, feasibility. We're also looking to maximize the bang for the buck, the visibility, the education value, meaning, how much water is currently being discharged to the storm system that we can divert into a rain garden and infiltrate and slowly release into the ground. So we have a whole set of criteria that we do that with. So this shows, you could take out most or all of your front lawn and replace it with a rain garden. And these are generally designed to hold the first couple of inches, at least that first flush of rainwater from a heavy rain, or all of the water from most of the rains. And so how to get it, I guess, have a rain garden at gmail.com, all one word, no dashes, have a rain garden at gmail.com. Send us an email and give us your address, phone number, and request a rain garden assessment, and you'll get on our list. And we won't get to you immediately because we generally do them February, March, and maybe August. And so what we'll do is we'll put you on the list, and then you'll get an email from our Sign Up Genius invite, and select a time and a day, and then you'll get assessed.
And I'd also like to plug, if you're interested in helping plant, there's opportunities this spring, and you could also email Have a Rain Garden, the email for that.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in getting a rain garden, we offer 2 points on your score for each of the first 2 volunteer events you go to.
Cool. Thanks, Peter.
Yep.
Some other things you can do, soil improvement helps. Maybe you've seen these little machines, the soil aerators. I think you can rent them. This is something else that I'm thinking about doing on my lawn, because as lawns get old, they become compacted. The root system of the grass gets really shallow and dense. And if your lawn's like mine, it's all lumpy and it has bare spots and stuff. But when you aerate the soil, it does promote infiltration and retention of water and oxygen, and kind of improves the health of the grass or whatever you have growing there. Just generally improves the infiltration and retention capacity of the soil. So another idea to consider. And there's other things out there, in more sort of certain circumstances where you might have to use these things, like dry wells or subsurface infiltration basins like you're looking at here. These are, obviously much more expensive. There's a good bit of engineering and design that goes into these. So probably not something you want to, DIY, but it's an option that's out there for you. And so that is my presentation, but happy to discuss further or answer any questions or any thoughts that anybody has.
Well, I'll throw in some 2 cents while the other attendees are warming up to the idea of floating a question. So one of the slides that Will showed was the strips. And in Havertown, sort of the old school way of doing it is 2 concrete strips. And there's a lot of value, I think, of leaving them in place like that. I actually saw a fellow who, a family who got a rain garden, had just replaced their old concrete strips with new concrete strips. So you don't have to blacktop an old driveway. And create even more impervious surface. So I just wanted to throw that out.
I think they look nice personally.
I have one myself. It's actually a little strange and bumpy and a little cracked, but years ago in the 70s, the prior owner of the house actually filled in with old bricks and created an old brick walkway. And so we have, and it does hold water and infiltrate the water. And I like it. It's got character. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is, again, very old school. So there are these really neat looking interlocking permeable pavers, but don't discount the old, beautiful, natural slate walkway, right? And you see these on a lot of houses, like going from the driveway into the front door or something like that. And if they are just laid on the ground, on level ground, they make a perfectly serviceable walkway. And so that's an option. I do also want to caution you that if you don't really specify that you're looking for pervious and you ask, just a run-of-the-mill landscaper to put in a paver walkway, it's going to be bedded in concrete. It's not going to be permeable, pervious. So you really have to work at it with most contractors to get them to do it the way that will really work and infiltrate.
Yeah, and get the township to agree, right? That it counts as pervious.
Yes, right. So that is another hurdle. So I think, as Will mentioned, talking to the township engineer about what you want to do. Now, for all of these things, involving the township is really only necessary if you're trying to gain credit for removing impervious materials. If you're just trying to do it to be nice to Mother Nature, you have a lot more latitude to do what you think is right.
Any questions?
Hi. I have a question. I don't live in Haverford, but I live in Lansdowne, and we have a very like tight spot, like with not a whole lot of grass around it. And uh so I have an area like next to the a concrete driveway that just collects all the rainwater because but then it has nowhere to go. So our plan is to actually pave that over, but put one of the downspout planters underneath it and rain barrels. Because it has nowhere to go except into the walls of the basement, and then the walls of the basement are crumbling. Is that a viable solution, do you think, if I like keep the rainwater from going into the house and going onto the driveway?
It certainly should help, although, in a really big storm that the planters just going to fill up and spill out. So it might not be enough to completely, fix your issue. You might consider, trying to route that downspout to a different area that's not so close to your foundation, or yeah, it's hard I don't know exactly what your options are, but sometimes people will put, pipes under, like a little pipe under the driveway, so it discharges on the other side of the driveway.
Yeah,
Or,
it's a twin house immediately. So that there's another house on the other side of the driveway.
What is the current surface?
Right now it's half brick pavers and half grass. And it's just
So
has
this
nowhere
is,
to go except into the house.
so, the dirt surface is an easy fix. We get a lot of people asking us to do assessments because they have water problems, including water in the basement. And, reverse grading is the problem in 95% of these cases. And so why does it reverse grade? Maybe it could be due to a whole lot of things, voids created by construction, or
You
the
mean it
weight
sloped
of
towards the
cars.
house?
It's
Yeah.
sloped towards the house. So anything that is dirt, you could, get a shovel. So, right. So what you want in a soil surface is you want a small, gentle grade away from the house. And that could be handled with a shovel. Now, here's the caveat. Right up against the house, you want the worst possible soil for planting, AKA clay.
That's what we have everywhere.
You have a
That
lot
would
of
be
clay.
right.
Well, so you could just you could relocate that clay and create like a 6-inch lip up against the side of the house. So the biggest inflow occurs if the water is just right up against the foundation wall and can go straight down. Right. And then under the foundation, there's usually like stone. And so it's conducts the water very well. So we've actually solved a few people's water problems just by telling them, hey, get a little level and move the tightest clay-like soil that you could find. And if you're moving it from one part of the property to the other, you want to take off that 6 to 8 inches of topsoil, which is very pervious usually, and find the nastiest looking clay that you could find and compact it good. And that should seal the worst of it right up against the house. And I've seen this so many times. I usually tell people to walk around the entire perimeter of your house and find those little gaps, and fill them. And I've seen people thinking not correctly that, oh, if I fill this little depression with stone, it's going to stop the water from going into my basement. Well, the opposite is true, right? The stone is just going to pass the water right through. So you could, depending on your situation, you could try the quick and dirty, clay soil wedge up against the house. Now you still want to try to grade it ideally so that the water puddles are not there sitting within a couple of feet of the house. So it may be more than just a little wedge of soil, depending on the situation. The bricks is another matter. I don't know if they're cemented in or not cemented in, but so there are other possibilities that, short of paving, that you could try and see if they work. And they could be DIY'd.
Okay. All
Peter,
right.
question, when you guys design the rain gardens, how far away from the foundation what's the minimum that you
So
would put a rain garden?
our rule of thumb is we're not going to put the rain garden within 10 feet of the foundation wall. And so, the rain garden will create sort of a little diagonal water profile radiating out from that location. And so that's usually far enough that it's not going to intersect the foundation wall. You know, we do ask people about the water problems and if we can easily solve them as well. By the way, Kate, I did want to mention that if you haven't already done it, there's something called Stormwater Stream Smart Assessments.
Yeah, we did that.
That
Yeah. And
you
we
did
got
that,
plants out of
okay.
them.
Okay, but they didn't
Yeah,
solve your water problems. Yeah, okay.
yeah, they gave
Sorry about that.
a suggestion. Yeah.
But the clay soil, I've had at least 2 or 3 people tell me after the fact, oh, that worked.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I suppose if you had one of those planters up, you know, on a pedestal or something strong enough to hold its weight, then the drain coming out could have enough slope that you could direct that water somewhere else. You know what I mean?
My plan was to have the planter have it like go into have it be like kind of wide and up and have it drain into basically rain barrels like underneath it that could then be like discharged later. The people at the stormwater thing said we could have the rain barrel and you can like discharge it like into the driveway, just not during the storm, you know, just have it do and then it'll evaporate before it gets to the stream.
Yeah, you want to have somewhere for it to overflow to, right? In case you're on vacation or something and you're not there to manage it yourself. But if you got it up high enough, I could see how you could overflow it to a different place.
Yeah, we're planning on doing like a 3 foot high thing and then kind of like a frame. But yeah, it's like 2 different downspouts in that area. One is like a small portion of the roof, and then the other one has like most of it.
Gotcha. Good luck.
Yeah, Kate, if you send a photo to me, maybe I could give you some other ideas.
Okay, yeah. Well, I know where to find you, Peter.
Yes, you do.
Any other questions? I just wanted to add another thing about whenever I think of stormwater that was not brought up is our downstream neighbors. So when when we have these big storm events and all of our stormwater for the area is feeding into our streams and our downstream neighbors are being flooded because the streams are overflowing. That's one of the things that I think about with managing our stormwater.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, Thomas, you mentioned you were a kayaker. If you've ever kayaked in streams after a rain, you can attest to the pollution that gets washed in there, right? Muddy waters and oftentimes stinky waters.
Okay,
I
so
know it's, you know, you really, the worst time to paddle in terms of, people ask like, is, because we paddle in the Schuylkill too. You know, around Philadelphia, people ask like, is the Schuylkill clean? And I know the worst time to paddle it is, you know, after a rainstorm when you get all that runoff.
Yeah, I feel your pain. I've done it before. The first time I did it under the mistaken impression on the Darby Creek, actually, that, oh, it's going to bring the water level up. It's the perfect time to go kayaking. That was
That's
incorrect.
true from the water. It's got to be high enough. Like you can paddle Darby Creek if it gets to a certain point, you know, in the normal flow, you can't. It would be a lot of walking.
Yep.
Can you guys talk at all about, like, I know, you know, most of the, maybe all of, I think now all of Darby Creek and Chrome Creek is all township parkland basically, or, you know, it's a floodplain. Can you guys talk about what the township is doing to try to, you know, deal with runoff and on township properties? Anything different? I know they're planting, although I already know just by being there, they're planting trees, you know, all along Darby Creek, which, you know, again, they drink a lot of the water. You know, certainly you've got to help.
Yeah, it's a very difficult challenge, one of the reasons why we have been pushing property owners to do things themselves is because, it's a pretty built out community. And the stream and environs in a lot of locations is kind of boxed in. So if you look at Naylor's Run, which runs through Haverford and Upper Darby and beyond, a lot of the segments of Naylor's Run are actually concreted in. There's a section of Cobb's Creek which is concreted in. And so it's difficult to remedy in sort of one fell swoop in the riparian zone of the streams, which some of them don't have any riparian zones. So that's why we sort of are trying to walk upstream and get people to think about improving it on their own property. The township has an obligation under the current state requirements for stormwater to do some projects, but I have to say they have thus far been somewhat uninspiring projects. The biggest problem in the streams itself is scour. So if you go to Darby Creek, there are some actively eroding stream walls. And every inch of stream bank that comes off is creating a lot of sediment that settles on the bottom of the stream. And these, one of the projects that is done oftentimes by municipalities is to do stream bank restoration, where they're cutting in at a more gentle slope and vegetating and anchoring, and sometimes combining it with natural armoring. But that takes land that is often just no longer available. And so it's difficult in this built environment. Lansdowne, Upper Darby, Haverford, those are difficult places to cure the problem at the stream side.
But they are doing the tree planting, so the area, between not stream bank and the stream, and we call it the riparian buffer. And they are doing a lot of tree planting and also invasive removal there, so the trees then have more of a chance, and that helps. But it's like Peter was saying, it's not necessarily the
Yes,
only
I did not mean to disrespect the trees. The trees actually are now have some respect in the ordinance itself as well. So there's factors that encourage developers in particular not to take trees down. And a big old tree is going to catch a lot of water if it's leafed out, and is going to absorb a tremendous amount of water. I think, the figures are in the thousands of gallons, for a big old tree that's got, a 75-foot, 100-foot spread. And so, yeah, that is something that everyone could do. And we're sort of losing, we're actually losing tree cover in Haverford and in a lot of towns because the trees tend to come down and not be replaced. And, that's something that we also want to reverse. And there's plenty of sources of free trees in Haverford and beyond, including the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has the Plant 10 Million Trees Pennsylvania program. If you search for it, you could actually sign up for free native trees and shrubs, small, but very, very viable, that you could plant anywhere on your property. The only prerequisite that they have is you tell them where it's going to be planted.
You know, the one thing I do that I think helps, and maybe it's a small thing, but a simple thing. I have a pretty large vegetable garden at my house, and you know, every fall, and we have a large tree in the front. I just bag the leaves with a mower and just put them on the garden, and that's my my mulch for the next year. And I also always felt that the leaves themselves, and actually the one scout camp on the Chesapeake Bay would always say, like, the leaves are really important to keep the soil soft. Without the leaves, the rain hits the soil and it impacts it more and it makes it harder and it creates more runoff. So I thought, everybody, taking all the leaves up and having that, carpet of a lawn is probably the worst thing for runoff to do. Is that in
Well,
fact true?
that is absolutely true. And I can tell you, we when we assess homes for rain gardens, we do a little 1 foot deep perk test. We oftentimes will do a 3 or 4 foot deep hand auger core. And going through a lawn is really, really instructive, because oftentimes if we come in 3 or 4 days behind a rain, by the time we're at 6 inches, it's dry as a bone. And it's because of what you just described, the compaction, the years of kids running across the lawn, no leaves, nothing to add organic matter to the soil. It is, I want to say, not much better than pavement.
Peter, the other thing I always do is just raise the mower. I don't cut the lawn real low, because even the grass being a little taller to me would have the same effect. That if you don't cut the grass close to the ground, the grass itself is going to absorb some of the impact of the rain. It sounds like almost microscopic, but I'm sure that's true. It's just going to hit the grass leaves instead of the dirt.
Yeah, it is true. You could also get you could do native grasses that have a although I actually did that on my front lawn. We redid the front of the house, and I had put in a what's called a low mow grass. The problem is there's grass seeds coming in from the rest of the world.
Sure.
But absolutely not cutting it as low, I should say. And every little bit is going to help. Yeah. And the aerating it, if you're going to keep lawn, it's probably 50-50 chance that it's never been aerated if your house is 60 or 80 years old, that it's never been aerated. And so it's really, really highly compacted.
Yeah, we're in Westgate Hills and we have zoysia grass everywhere in the front yards. It just takes over the neighborhood, or it did many years ago. I know that stuff is really dense. I don't know what rain gets through it.
What type of grass you said, Gus?
I call it zoysia grass.
Oh, zoysia. Yeah. Zoysia is really
Yeah, I don't
tough.
know that it is a grass, actually. Maybe it's something else.
Maybe I'm not that familiar. It also looks terrible in the fall and winter.
Yeah.
It turns brown. Yeah. Although when it's growing in season, it's really tough, which is why people like it.
Jenny or Chevron, do you have any questions? Okay. I think if not, we can have an early evening. Thank you very much, Will, for presenting, and Peter for all your wisdom being added. And of course, plant more trees, capture your rainwater, reduce pervious surface, and add more native plants too while you're at it.
Thanks for
So
coming.
much, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good night.